Hello everyone, and welcome to Dwarf Fortress. It is finally happening. I've been using the original game's representation of a dwarf for ages now as my online avatar, and with the release of the new and updated Steam version, it is the perfect time to start a playthrough. In case you are not familiar with the game, this is the granddaddy of pretty much every colony simulation game you can think of. RimWorld? Prison Architect? Going Medieval? Oxygen not included? We can thank Dwarf Fortress for the inspiration for all these titles. Hell, even Minecraft would be a vastly different game, as the ties between the two games are well documented. There are a lot of much better YouTubers out there who could go into details what makes this game so special, but in brief, it is a game with countless different interlocking mechanics and features, all working together, creating pretty much the deepest world simulation in gaming. Just put the words, Dwarf Fortress Killing Cats, into the YouTube search bar, preferably after you finish watching this video, and you can find a little anecdote about how different systems in the game resulted in the deaths of many cats due to alcohol poisoning. I'm not gonna go any more into that, you'll just have to find out yourselves. As for the goals of the game, basically you are meant to guide 7 dwarves, helping them to establish a new fortress for their civilization. Over time, more and more of them will join your new settlement, and as the wealth of your fort increases, it will attract the attention of both friendly traders, sneaky thieves, as well as other, much bigger threats. I could go on for ages, gushing about how much I love the game, but instead, we might as well jump into it. The first step is always the creation of a new world. These are the basic options, but there is an advanced mode available, with incredibly detailed setting you can tinker with, in case you think you know better, or if you are looking for something specific in your game. For our game, we are going to go with a small world, with a 250-year history. I will also set the mineral frequency to sparse. It just makes it so that we are not tripping over metal or veins at ridiculous rates. And this is where the magic happens. After the game arrives at a suitable geography, it will begin populating the world with different civilizations, and starts generating the history. Historical figures born and die, wars and battles are waged, grand artifacts are created, settlements are founded, I could go on. I did set the generated history to 250 years, but only so I can interrupt it at a random date. By default, the game stops at 100, but I prefer to start at a date that is a bit less round. 146, sounds good to me. If you would like to explore that history for yourself, there is a built-in Legends mode, that will let you do just that. But let's get into the meat of the game, Fortress mode. So, before we get started, we need to decide which dwarven civilization to be part of. This world have 3 of them. All of them are pretty small, so we are going to go with the biggest, just so our trade opportunities are better. Next, we need to find a suitable place to settle. You can set a lot of different filters here, but for now, we are just going to ask the game to find some place where we don't have to deal with aquifers. They come in 2 flavors. The light aquifer is relatively easy to deal with, but heavy aquifers are a real pain. But for the sake of simplicity, we are going to exclude both from this playthrough. My next criteria is the amount of soil we have. Generally speaking, the more the better. They are a good way to get some form of mushroom farms going early, and they are super easy to dig through, so they are also a good way to level up our miners. And the third criteria I go for is some kind of a sudden elevation change on the map. I always thought it makes sense for dwarves to start digging into the side of a mountain, instead of digging a hole in the middle of a big flat plain. Yeah, this place will do fine, let's just find a spot that is free from any aquifers, and we can go for it. There we go. I already prepared an embark profile for us in advance. As I've said before, we have 7 dwarves to start with. I made 2 of them into miners, which is 1 more than the default. We have a lot of digging to do early on, so we better do it fast. We also have a woodworker, who will be responsible for both chopping down trees, and turning them into different furnitures at the carpentry shop. Then there's the stoneworker, who will act as our mason and stonecutter. Our farmer will tend to our farms, as well as brew our drinks, and cook our meals. The one listed as the doctor will be our administrator. They will keep a detailed inventory, manage our work orders, and also meant to be both our broker and resident medical dwarf. The last one is our crafts dwarf. They will create all sorts of trinkets and everyday items out of stone and wood. As for our animals, we have 2 dogs and 2 cats. All of them female. It can be a good thing to keep a breeding pair around, but for now, let's just go with this, so their populations don't get out of hand. As for our list of items, it's nothing special. Just a basic assortment of goods, some tools, an anvil, food, drinks, seeds, everything a fresh new fortress need to get started. Next, let's select a name for our fortress. Furnaces Silvers. Sounds good to me. Lastly, let's choose a name for our group of dwarves. The Sunken Lanterns. Also a good name. And with that, we are pretty much done. Let's embark. And this is where we start our journey towards greatness. Let's see what the welcoming message has to say. You have arrived. After a journey from the mountain homes into the forbidding wilderness beyond, your harsh trek has finally ended. Your party of 7 is to make an outpost for the glory of all of Obok Duthel. That's the dwarven name of our civilization, the Pillars of Worth. There are almost no supplies left, but with stout labor comes sustenance. Whether by bolt, plow, or hook, provide for your dwarves. You are expecting a supply caravan just before winter entombs you, but it is spring now. Enough time to delve secure lodgings, where the hyenas get hungry. A new chapter of dwarven history begins here at this place, Furnace Silvers. Strike the earth. From now on, the footage will run at 2 times speed, which is likely the format we will be using for this playthrough. To get started, we need to find a suitable place to start digging. This tiny little crevice in the hillside seems like a good starting point. Instead of immediately digging into it, however, I would like to make it a bit more uniform, so we can have a little bit of a front yard for ourselves. To make it work, we will also need to get rid of some of the trees. We need an early supply of logs anyways, so it's a 2 birds with 1 stone situation. That will do it for now. It's just a place to store our garbage until it decays, so it doesn't stink up the place. I usually like to start digging downwards immediately, but this time, how about we take advantage of the upper parts of the hill we are going to live in? If the initial entrance hallway goes deep enough, then the central stairs can go up several layers before encountering the surface again. But before we do any of that, let's get our dwarves underground. They like being inside, and in case it starts raining, they won't start complaining to me about it. That was achieved by simply setting a meeting zone in the hallway. Before, they were gathering around the cart. So, let's set down the central stairway. It will be a very spacious 3x3, with lots of room for dwarves to get out of each other's way. It will go from the highest possible point, without actually breaking through the surface, down to level 0. Don't get too comfortable with that number. That just means sea level. We can go deeper. Much, much deeper. In the meantime, I also told them to start storing garbage and somewhat outside. Hey, good news. We already struck magnetite, one of the ores of iron. There are so many kinds of stones in the game, you can become an amateur geologist just by Googling some of them. Next order of business, farming. We are cave dwellers, so we prefer to do it underground. And what grows in the absence of sunlight? That's right, fungi. But before I got to it, I checked the list of creatures in the vicinity, and apart from the usual wild animals, we also had this alligator man. Let's hope we won't have to worry about him. They are intelligent, but also a bit unpredictable. Let's hope it's a live and let live situation. Who knows, maybe if we don't disturb him, he will eventually decide to join our fort as a visitor, and later as a fully integrated member of our civilization. Let's not forget about our livestock too. We have 2 yaks as extra animals. They weren't part of the initial embarkation setup, but since we need some animals to draw our wagon, they were provided free of charge by the king. Since they are grazing animals, it's best to keep them outside, so a pasture zone was set up for them. So, let's get back to the farming. I decided to have it 2 levels above the entrance hallway. After creating a small room around the stairs for aesthetic reasons, we can start digging the actual rooms and corridors. I think a couple 5x5 rooms will be great for the farms themselves. That lower one will end up being something else though. Next, we need a couple rooms for the different workshops. We will need a still, and a fishery at the start, but later, we will expand our food industry with a butcher, a kitchen, farmer's workshop, etc. See how much faster the miner going through the soil is, compared to the one cutting into stone? Quite the difference. Okay, time to set up the start of the food industry. We will need a farm field, and a still at the absolute minimum. I will also include a fishery. It's a good source of food early on, and will give a bit of variety, so we don't only eat mushrooms all the time. Now, the room I wanted to use for the second farm turned out to have some stone flooring, which is unusable for that purpose. There is a way to turn it into farmable tiles though. I will end up abandoning this project, but it's a good demonstration nonetheless. All we need is a source of water, a couple buckets, and way to dump water onto the tiles that need mud on them. That's why I ended up cutting a hole in the ceiling of that room. We will drop some water down from there. If we don't overdo it, the water will spread out into puddles, and as they evaporate, they will leave some mud behind, which will turn bare stone into farmable soil. In the meantime, I told my dwarves to start building a couple temporary workshops, one for carpentry, another for masonry. Might as well start making some doors and beds, we will need them pretty soon. Especially a door. To prevent water from spilling out of that room we are trying to create mud in, we will need a door. And with that in place, we can designate that hole in the ceiling as a place to dump water. Dwarves with some free time on their hands will grab a bucket, fill it up at the water source, and pour it down into that room. The water will cover the floor, and as it evaporates, it will leave some mud behind. But as I've said, I will eventually abandon this project. That room will be perfect for storing food instead, and we can just use other rooms for farming. Anyways, while I was babbling, I did set the farm plot to start planting plump helmets, a form of edible mushroom in that farm plot. And our dwarves are already busy planting. Next, let's start digging out our living arrangements. Once again, we start by creating a small room around the stairs. No real reason to do it, it just looks better this way. We should also start using priorities for mining. If we kept using the default settings, our miners would spend more time doing menial jobs, like hauling stuff around. This will tell them that mining is more important. I also told the carpentry shop to stop making doors, and instead start making beds. We will also need a central stockpile to store all our stuff. This level looks very well suited for this. We have nice soft soil to the north, so we can dig out a big room pretty quickly, while the rocky layer to the south will be perfect for the workshops. It's just a personal choice of mine. I like to create a grid of 5x5 cells, separated by a single tile in between. Then I use these cells as the place for our different stockpiles. This mud generating endeavor doesn't seem to go all that well. It's mostly down to the lack of water close by. We had these two little puddles to start out with, but they got used up pretty quickly. Once it's gone, they will have to walk further, and by the time they get back, the water will already be dry. Anyways, let's turn our attention to our living quarters. At first, I wanted to try making something a bit more interesting than a simple grid of bedrooms, but eventually I just went with what I know best. Yeah, just go with what works. We will have these simple hallways, with 2 by 3 rooms on each side. I made sure to not have the mining designation connected to the rest of the fort yet. I want to finish digging out the warehouse first. We already have one corner that can have the first stockpile designated. It will be used to store weapons. I think you get the general idea. 5 by 5 stockpiles, separated by a single empty tile. We will simply place them one by one, and go through the list of the different presets, ending up with a storage for everything. We can even create bigger storages, by simply merging 2 cells together. Like this furniture stockpile. We will need a lot of space for them. This will do for now. It's not a complete warehouse, but perfectly adequate for a start. At this point, I decided to just start digging out more rooms closer to the outside. That should ensure that we have soil in those rooms. We can just use that one for food storage instead. And you might have noticed that we started harvesting mushrooms. That's 1/2 of our diet taken care of. Since we won't need any more water in that room, let's just stop dumping water down by removing the pond zone from upstairs. Over time, that water will evaporate. Anyways, we still need a place to store our food. For that, we will have 3 separate stockpiles. This small one will be used for seeds. We just need to tell it to only accept those, and make sure not to allow any barrels in there. Any bags containing seeds will be taken there, so they are right next to the farm fields where they will be used. And with the 2 new rooms done, we can place the food and the drink storages. The one on the left will be for drinks only, and the right one will be just for food. Don't worry about the water. It will dry up soon, and won't be spoiling our meals. Next, might as well start brewing some drinks. Right now, we only have access to plump helmets. Those are the ingredients for dwarven mushroom wine. Tasty stuff. Good thing we brought some empty barrels with us, so we don't need to make those to get started. Anyways, let's get things rolling with our bedrooms. There are a couple things we really need to sort out, and since alcohol production is now sorted, the next thing on the agenda are our living arrangements. We could place some beds in a big empty room, and designate it as a dormitory, but that's only good for a while. To keep our guys happy, we should give them all individual rooms. Thank you, autosave. Before I was rudely interrupted, I was about to order a table and a chair from the mason's workshop. We will need to create an office for our manager, so he can sit down and sort out the paperwork. Technically, we don't really need one right away, since early work orders don't need validation, but that's only true at the very start. As things get more busy, they will have to be signed off by the manager, and for that they will need an office, so might as well build one now. As for our bedrooms, they are being dug out nicely, and since we have beds and doors already made, we can start placing them. We have plenty of beds, but not enough doors. Let's just make some more. Another good news. We just stuck lignite. That's a form of coal ore that we can process into fuel for our furnaces. But we are not quite there yet, let's make sure we take care of the essentials first. Alright, that's the beds taken care of for 20 bedrooms. Hopefully that will be enough for a couple migrant waves. And now that we have some of the living quarters ready to go, we can designate them as bedrooms. This new multi-zone feature is super handy. Before this version, we had to do it all one by one. Let's see how we can deal with the workshops. We should build them as close to the warehouse as possible, so they have easy access to raw materials, and our finished goods won't have to be hauled too far either. Yeah, this looks good to me. We can even use the central hall as a place for some smaller stockpiles, where we can store specific raw materials. Will be very handy when we can start streamlining the different workshops. Speaking of workshops, we can move the 2 temporary ones down here. We can also build some more, like a crafts shop, so we can create everyday items, a jeweler to start cutting the different gems we find, and maybe a mechanic shop, so we can start creating some more complex stuff. And with that, we can remove these 2 from the entrance hallway. We should have enough doors at this point to finish the bedrooms. And we did. Perfect. We had a notification about an ocelot getting into a fight. We don't see what it's struggling with, but it's not doing so well. Well, as long as it's not fighting us, we should be okay. At this point, the wagon we arrived in is pretty much empty. Let's dismantle it, and reclaim some wood. And we have 20 cozy little bedrooms ready to go. They are still pretty poor, only a bed, a door, and rough cave walls. But once we start adding more furniture, smooth out the rock surfaces, they will be much better places to live. With this essential step taken care of, the next thing we need to sort out is a place for our dwarves to eat, drink, and socialize. And for that, we will need to build a tavern. This main room will be the social space. To the right of it, we will have a small dormitory. This is where our guests will sleep, as well as our homeless dwarf population. Hopefully not for long. To the left, we are going to have a dining room. This is where people can come to eat in peace. It will be pretty small for now, but over time, we can expand it. This should be big enough for 10 tables. We have also struck cassiterite. It's an ore of tin, and can also be used as glazing for pottery. Cool. Might as well place the second farm field. If we have space for it, then why not? And you know what, let's dig out a room for a third. We are out of plump helmet spawns, which is basically the seed for these mushrooms, but as dwarves eat it raw, and as it gets brewed into wine, it will leave those spawns behind. But only in those circumstances. The spawns get destroyed if the mushrooms are cooked. Be very careful with that. It's very easy to run out of mushrooms if you allow them to be cooked. Anyways, the next important thing we need are drinking cups. Dwarves get cranky if they need to drink straight from the barrel. We can just tell the crafts workshop to start making rock mugs infinitely. Apart from being useful for our own population, they are also a decent trading good, and we can use them to barter when the first caravan arrives. In the meantime, we can start planning out some more bedrooms. I don't want to make these corridors too long, 10 bedrooms for each is plenty. These are just plans, no need to connect them to the rest of the fortress yet. Anyways, the next on the agenda is a temple. Another thing dwarves can get annoyed about is the lack of space to honor their gods. Here, I was looking for a space for our manager's office. I could sacrifice one of the bedrooms for it, but I like having a nice even distribution of rooms. Having one office among them would break the uniformity. But that magnetite vein gave me an idea. How about we build it into that? But before I committed to it, we had a temple to build. I chose this place. It will have 2 entrances. A nice big central area for worshippers to gather, and maybe a small alcove in the back for the altar. In the meantime, we had our first migrants arrive. We are now 13 souls strong. Of course, no temple is complete without an altar, so let's order one from the mason. Next, let's take care of that office. As I've said, we will carve it out of this magnetite vein. Once it's all done, it will be quite a luxurious space. Even though the furniture itself is pretty poorly made, the walls will give quite a bit of value to it. And we can assign our administrator to it right away. Now that they have an office, we can give them some extra responsibilities. They will be our manager, validating different work orders, our bookkeeper, so we can have a much more accurate tally of our stocks, and he has the skills to act as our chief medical dwarf. Originally he was meant to be our broker as well, but one of our recent migrants turned out to be a much better choice for that job. And now that we have a manager, let's start setting up some work orders. First, we will need a steady supply of barrels, but not so much that we overproduce them. I think if we make 5 extra whenever we have less than 5 empty ones left, we should be okay. Same goes for bins. They are used to hold multiple small items, like the mugs we've been making for a while at this point. And let's automate the brewing too. Whenever we drop below 100 drinks, let's order 10 more. That should keep us going. We are going to set up other stuff in here in the future, but for now, this will be just fine. We can also order a one-time batch of things, like 10 more doors, 10 extra beds, things like that. To finish this office, how about we smooth out the walls and floors a little? That will increase the value considerably. Well, isn't that so much nicer? And this 3x3 space is now considered a splendid study. All because of the magnetite walls and floors. In the meantime, the stone altar we ordered got made. Let's place it in the temple, and set up the zone designation for it. It should be a meeting area, which we can turn into a temple as a subclass. For now, we are just going to use it as a non-specific holy place, so anyone can come and worship whichever deity they want to. Later on, as our population grows bigger, we will start getting requests to build more for specific gods and pantheons. This also made that temporary meeting area in the entrance hallway obsolete, by the way. Might as well smooth out the stone in there. Dwarves are happier if they can take care of their needs in nicer rooms. Next, how about we ask our manager to put out a work order for some chairs and tables for our dining room? It's also a good opportunity to use these orders to use a specific material. As I've said before, that dining room is the perfect size for 10 tables, so that is exactly how many we will order. And clicking on the magnifying glass icon, we can specify what material to use. We have plenty of mudstone available, will be perfect for the job. This way, it won't be a mishmash of differently colored furniture in the dining hall, it will be all uniform. And I don't like seeing our miners sitting idle, so how about we start digging out the next batch of bedrooms in the meantime? Thank you, autosave. We can also set up some of the different zones for our tavern as well. Let's start with the dormitory. It will just be a small room with a bunch of beds against the wall. Not the most glamorous accommodation, but for an early tavern, it will do. We have also struck kaolinite. Seem to be some form of clay we can use for pottery, and for different parts for instruments. Alright, it's all dug out, let's start furnishing. We should also prepare for the first caravan. It's early autumn already, and that's the season our dwarven brothers make their visit. All we need is a trade depot, that's where we can conduct business. Also notice that the refuse pile is completely full. Let's expand it, we don't want anything to rot inside the fortress, that would be super bad news. And I think that's where we will leave it for today. We have a lot of work to do still, but we did okay I think. We have booze, beds, mugs, a temple, and the tavern isn't far off either. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, then leaving a like and subscribing to the channel just might motivate me to make more. If you are more in the donating mood, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description, where you can buy me a glass of water. I don't really drink coffee. Thank you for your support, and until next time, I will see you later.